Hi, you watching your favorite YouTube channel, Learning Digital. Here we learn digital world things, so subscribe this channel for more digital world videos. Hi, you watching your favorite YouTube channel, Learning Digital. Here we learn digital world things, so subscribe this channel for more digital world videos. Hello and welcome to Introduction to Data Analysis using Microsoft Excel. In this video we will learn how to perform basic data analysis in Microsoft Excel on sales data from a sample company, and we will learn about the use of sorting and filtering tools as well as the use of functions and pivot tables to obtain specific information from the data provided. Both in my personal and professional life, I found Excel to be an invaluable tool for organizing things like annual budgets, developing work projects with teams of several people, and oftentimes I work with datasets that I want to perform an analysis on to obtain very specific information in a quick and easy manner. And there's a lot you can do in the realm of data analysis, but there are a number of very useful and applicable tools for all types of data analysis that we will learn about in this project. For the data analysis we'll be performing, we will work with a prepared spreadsheet that contains sales data from a sample company that sells office chairs to other companies and organizations. You will find the file titled Sales Data Analysis, which we will open directly in Excel. Here's a little sneak peek of the data we are going to work with. Let's begin. For this video we will be using a free online version of Excel from Microsoft Office 365. You will notice that your browser opened to the free Microsoft Office online page. If you already have a Microsoft account, you can use your account to log in. If you don't have an account, simply click on Sign Up for free. It will first ask you to write your email address and choose a password for your new account. And this email address could be your normal email, it doesn't have to be a Microsoft specific email. You will then have a code sent to your email to verify the email address. Pause the video and take a moment to create your account and log in and come back when you've completed this step. Great! After logging into your Microsoft Office account, you'll be directed to your home page, and here you will have access to recent documents that you might have been working on. Here you can also upload documents from your device. And then here on the menu bar on the left side of the screen, you have links to the different Office programs such as Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and you can also go to your OneDrive, which is your cloud where you can store the different documents that you are working on. Since we are going to be using a prepared spreadsheet with the sales data that we'll be analyzing, we'll first have to upload the file to our cloud. We could do this directly with this link where it says upload and open, or you could go to your OneDrive and here you'll have access to your cloud with all the documents. So we can upload a new document. We could click Got It and then upload a new document here where it says upload file, and then we will be able to access the file by double-clicking in Project Files, and you should see this document called Sales Data Analysis, and click Open. And now you'll see that the file has been automatically uploaded as an Excel file. So to open the file we'll be working on, you'll double-click, and it's the file named Sales Data Analysis, and here we have the spreadsheet. Well, something that is very convenient about using the online version of Microsoft Excel is that any changes made to the file are saved automatically, so we don't have to worry about losing changes or having to save changes manually. And now that you've opened the file, you can see the data we will be working with. The data tracks the sale of office chairs during the first half of 2020 by the different sales representatives. So for each sale or order we have the date and the month, the sales representative with their region. We also have a customer ID, and then for the chairs sold in that order we have the model and the color as well as an item code, the number of units that were sold, the price per unit and the total income for that sale. While the data doesn't look too messy, we are going to start by specifying that the data forms part of a table, and this will make it a lot easier to sort data and use filters later on, as well as make the information a little easier to read. To highlight the entire data from the table, we could do it manually, highlighting from cell A4 all the way down to cell. I went too far down to cell L84, or there's another little trick, which is we can click on any cell of the table. I'll just click on cell A4 and then type Ctrl A, and then Excel will automatically highlight all the cells that are part of the table. And then to convert this data into a table, we click on Insert Table, and then it'll confirm that the data for your table is the range from A4 to L84, and then you want to specify that your table has headers so that it knows that the first row of your table is for the headers, and click OK. Great, now that the data has been converted into a table, you'll see that the format of the cells has changed a little bit. Every row of the table is banded, which makes it a little easier to read. And then a great thing is that when we scroll down, you'll notice that the titles of the columns have changed to the headers of our table, which is great so that we don't have to guess what the column means when we scroll down. Well, this step completes this task. In this task, we learned how to set up the Microsoft Office 365 account, access our OneDrive, and upload a file to the drive as well as open the file. You also learned how to convert the data into a table to help with the data, and in this video you will start analyzing the data using sorting and filtering tools. Let's begin. Now that you've converted your data into a table, the first thing you might want to do is rearrange the data based on some of the categories of the table. The data is currently arranged based on the date the order was submitted. However, you could maybe want to have the data arranged by sales representative, for example, so that you can look up information about the sales that each salesperson did. Having converted the data into a table makes this step really easy. To the right of each header, you'll see a drop-down arrow that will allow us to sort the information and filter the data based on these headers. So for example, to sort the data by sales representative, we would click on the drop-down arrow to the right of the sales representative header. And then we would select Sort A to Z to sort it in alphabetical order. So after we click it, you'll see that the data has been rearranged by alphabetical order of the sales representative, starting with Amy Brown, followed by David Garcia, and so on. And here you can also see that the additional information about each sale was also rearranged along with it. And when having a data set like this one, it's really useful to have a first column that simply lists the original order in which the information was listed, so that we can always go back and rearrange the data as it was originally presented. So to do this, we would sort the data in ascending order of the first column, that is named number or none. And so we would click the drop-down arrow for this column, and then we would select sort from smallest to largest. And you could see that Excel recognizes that this is a numerical column. So in this case, we are sorting from the smallest value to the largest value. And by doing so, we've now gone back to the original order that we had our data in. Another useful tool similar to sorting is filtering. And this allows us to only focus on specific data while filtering out data that we don't need to see at a given moment. Let's say, for example, you are a sales manager for the North region of the company and wish to only look at sales that are made by sales representatives that are part of the North division. In this case, it would be useful to apply a filter on the region column. By having turned the data into a table, the filters for each header have already been created. And we can automatically click on the drop-down arrow and then select filter. And here we could see that we can select which division or which region we want to show. So we could click first on select all to remove all of them, and then click on North, and then apply that filter. And here you can see that we are only showing these sales that were done by the representatives that form part of the North division. And having the filter applied, we can actually obtain some quick information. For example, if we wanted to calculate the total revenue from the sales made by the North division, we can highlight the cells from the total column. So from L5 all the way down to the last one. And here at the bottom right corner, we could get some information about this data. We have the average, we have the count, which tells us how many sales were made. And then we have the total sum of $179,065, which is the information that we wanted. Now, if we wanted to access the entire data set again, we would need to remove the filter we currently have on the region category. You will see when a filter is being applied to a category because the icon changes from a drop-down arrow to a funnel, which is the icon for filtering. So to remove the filter, we would click on that icon again, go to filter, and now we would want to select all to show the sales from the North, South, and West regions, and click OK. Let's practice calculating what the total revenue was for the sales made by David Garcia, and also calculating how many total chairs he sold. You'll want to use the filtering tool, and then reference the quick information provided at the bottom right corner of the screen when you just have the sales made by David Garcia filtered. You will have first filtered the data to only show the sales made by David Garcia, doing this in the sales representative column. Now, to calculate the total revenue, you can highlight the sales from the total column, and we could get the total down here, the sum, which is $71,040. Then to calculate the total number of chairs that he sold, you would highlight the number column, you'd highlight those cells, and then you would look at the sum, which is 253 chairs in this case. Great job! Well, this step completes this task where you learned how to use the sorting and filtering tools to rearrange your data and quickly obtain information about them. Welcome. In this task you will learn how to relate tables located in different worksheets and search for information using the lookup function. You will see on the spreadsheet that there is a second worksheet named Customer Info which relates the customer ID number that we have in the first table with the company name for the customer and the client representative. Let's say that in the first table you would like to add an additional column that includes the company name in addition to the client ID. Using the lookup function we can actually look at this information which would relate the customer ID listed for each sale to the company name. So let's see how we would do this. We are going to first add a new column to insert that company name, and we'll position it to the left of the model column so that it's right after the customer ID. So we are going to right click on column G and select insert columns, and we'll name this new column company name. Now let's learn about the lookup function and how we can use it. Our goal is to insert the company name using the client ID that is stated for each sale. So for example, since the client ID for the first sale is 132, if we go to the second worksheet, that should list the company name of Bankia, and we are going to do that with the lookup function. Doing it manually for each cell would take forever, and that's why it's useful to have a function that can look up information from another worksheet or even from the same worksheet and pull that information to this table. So we'll start by writing the function lookup in cell G5, and as we do with all functions, we start with the equal sign lookup, and then as we did with the if function, we could press tab to open up the parentheses. And now let's see what we want to include in our function. So the first thing that we need to include is the lookup value, which in this case is the customer ID number from cell F5. So you'll click F5, and that's what we are trying to look up. Then we have to select the table array, so it's the cells where we are going to check if we can find this customer ID number, and that is when we are connecting it to the second worksheet. So now we are connecting information from two different tables located into different worksheets, but all you have to do is go to the second worksheet, and we are going to highlight the cells from A4 to C12. So we are highlighting these cells with the content of the second table, and up here we can keep track of what we are including in our function, and you can see that when we highlighted these cells, it references that these cells belong to the customer info worksheet or tab. So we don't have to do anything special when referencing to different worksheets. It automatically detects that we are in the customer info worksheet, and now for this range we are going to want to anchor these cells so that the range doesn't change when we apply this formula to the other cells for the column. We could do this by adding a $sign in front of the A and the 4 and then in front of the C and the 12, but there's also a shortcut to do this, which is using F4 on your keyboard. So by typing F4, which I'll do right now, you could see that it has added the $sign in front of the letters and the numbers for our reference cells. So after specifying the table array, you then need to specify the column index number from the reference table of a value you want to return. Our reference table is the one we have just highlighted, and it has 3 columns where column 1 is the customer ID, column 2 is the company name, and column 3 is the name of the client representative. So in our case we would write 2 because we want the function to return the company name. So in our formula, after the table array we'll have comma 2, and lastly you are going to have a true or false statement depending on whether you want an approximate or an exact match. The vast majority of the times you use lookup, you'll state false to look for an exact match. So here after the 2 you'll have a column false, and we'll close our parentheses, and now after closing our parentheses we could check our formula again. So we have F5, then the cell reference with the $signs, then the column index number of 2 for the company name, comma false for the fact that we are looking for an exact value, and now we could press enter, and you'll see that it took us back to our first worksheet, and it has inserted the company names for or that match with the different customer IDs for our table. Great, well now let's practice this again, but this time adding a new column with the names of the client representatives. The process will be the same, but the column that the lookup function returns will be different. If you are up for the challenge, pause the video and use the lookup function to look up the names of the client representatives. You will need to add a new column positioned to the right of the company name column you just created and come back when you are done. Great, let's see. Well, in this case you would have F5 for the customer ID from the table in the sales data worksheet. You have the cell reference the same as before. Now the only thing that changes is that the column index number is number 3 because it's the third column that we want to get as a response, the client representative name and then the condition of false. Now we could press enter and it will take us back to our table. So for this example you should have added a new column named it company name and you would have written the lookup function in cell H5 and you can see that it has auto-populated this new column with the client representative names. Great job. Well, this step completes this task where you have learned how to reference tables located in different worksheets and search for information using the lookup function. Welcome. In this task, we will learn how to do some data mining using the if function. The idea behind data mining is that you take the data you already have and you create new or additional data from it. There are different functions and analysis that you can perform as data mining, but one common function that is used is the if function. When using the if function, what we are doing is asking a question about the data and then we get to responses depending on whether the answer would be true or false for the question. Before we get into an example, let's remove first the filter we had applied from the previous task so that we show all the sales. We'll go to the sales representative column and then click on filter and select all to show all the sales again. Let's see how we would use the if function with an example which will be easier to understand. Let's say that when an order has 20 chairs or more, the client receives a 5% wholesale discount. We first want to figure out which sales had 20 chairs or more to see if we need to apply the discount to the sale or not. In our table, we are going to add a new column which we will call it discount, and we could do this to the right of the total column. In column M, we will write as a header discount, and after pressing enter, Excel automatically recognizes that we are adding an additional column to our table. We can make this column a little wider, and so in this column, we are going to have an N for no if the sale doesn't have the wholesale discount because there were fewer than 20 chairs, or a Y for yes for sales that had more than 20 chairs and will have the wholesale discount. We are going to do this with the if function. In cell M5, we are going to start with our if function. As with every function, we start with an equal sign and then we'll type if, and here you'll see the list of different if functions that Excel has. We are just going to use the regular if function, and here a little trick is that we could click on or type tab and Excel will open up the parentheses for our function and will list what we need to include inside the parentheses. We have the logical test, which is the question that we are answering, which is if the sale had more than 20 chairs or 20 chairs or more, then what value we want to have as a response if this was true, which in our case is a Y for yes, and the value if the condition is false, which in this case is an N for no. Let's write our function so we have that what we are testing is if cell J5 is equal more than or equal to 20. We click on cell J5, then we are asking if it's greater than or equal to 20. Then we want a Y as a response for the true condition, and since we are asking for a text response we need to use quotations, so Y within quotations and then comma N if this is false, and then we would close the parentheses and we'll press enter and we'll see what we get. So you could see that after writing the equation, it's auto-filled the remaining cells of the table, and let's check if the equation works. In the first case we have an N because the number of chairs sold in that first cell was 15, which is less than 20, but then in the second one we have a Y because there were 22 chairs sold, which is greater than or equal to 20, so it did work. Great. Well, to make it easier to see, we could maybe align the text in the middle of the cell, so let's highlight the whole M column and then we can align our text in the center so that we could see the N and the Y, and now with this we know which cells would have the wholesale discount and which cells don't, and we could even filter the data to show only the cells with the discount if we wanted to. Now let's continue with this example to practice this a little more. Instead of listing the cells that have the discount and which ones don't, let's say that we actually want to calculate the final price for the cell applying the discount only to the sales that had 20 or more chairs. We could also do this with the if function. We are going to create a new column on column N, so I'm going to drag this a little to the right and we are going to name this new column final price, for example. We'll click enter and it'll again recognize that it's a new column of our table, and to use the if function we are going to start like we did last time, so equals if, press tab to open the parentheses, and in our case the logical function is the same as we previously had where we are asking if J5 is greater than or equal to 20. But now the response is a little more complex, because if this is true we want to apply the discount to the total price that we calculated, and for sales with 20 or more chairs the final price is going to be 95% of this initial total that we calculated, which would be applying that 5% discount, so 100 minus 5 gives us 95. So to do that, 95% as a decimal is 0.95, and we are going to multiply that, so we use an asterisk and then multiply it by that total that we had previously calculated. So our response, if true, it would be 0. 95 times L5, but if it's false we don't want to apply the discount, so we'll write comma and then for false we would just have cell L5 because we don't want to have a discount applied to it, and then we'll close the parentheses and press enter, and it should auto-populate the remaining cells of the column, and we could now check this. So for all of the sales that didn't have a discount the final price should be the same as the total, so we could see that for our first sale, but for the second sale which did have the discount the final price, you could see that it's a little lower than our initial total, meaning that 5% discount has been applied. Now we could format this column by highlighting the total column and stating that we have currency in this one, and now we could see that it's changed to US dollars, and since they're pretty big numbers we can remove the zeros after the decimal by clicking on the decrease decimal icon 2 times, and now we have the format for our new column with the final price. Welcome back. In the previous video, you learned how to relate tables located in different worksheets and search for information using the lookup function. In this video, you will learn about another strategy for data analysis, which is using pivot tables. Pivot tables allow you to summarize and analyze the data by seeing comparisons in your data. To create the pivot table, you will first highlight the entire sales table by doing it manually or by clicking on any cell on the table and then typing Ctrl A, and it'll automatically highlight all the data from the table. Then to add the pivot table, you will go to Insert in the ribbon and then select Pivot Table. Here it will ask you to define the table or range, which you have already done by highlighting the cells. Then it will ask you to choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. I always recommend selecting new worksheet so its placement doesn't affect the other data that already exists in the current worksheet. Now we'll click OK, and you will see that a new worksheet appears to the left of the sales data worksheet. Now that we have the new worksheet, let's create the first pivot table. To the left you'll see the empty pivot table, and to the right of the screen you'll see a section called Pivot Table Fields, where you will define what information you would like to plot on your pivot table. To create a pivot table, you will define the categories as either filters, columns, rows, or values. In the values category, you will only have numbers. So in our case, this could be the units column for the number of chairs sold, or the final price column, for example. If a category is specified as a column, it will appear in the pivot table as the columns of the table, and the same applies to rows. Then for filters, this is less commonly used, but you can also have a category appear as a filter with a drop-down menu to select from. It's probably easier to understand with an example. Imagine your boss asks you to calculate how much each sales representative made in sales throughout the first 6 months of the year. In the value section, you would want to include the final price category since it shows the total profit from each sale after the wholesale discount. And this one makes sense because that final price category has numbers in them, right? So we would drag that to values to include it in our pivot table. Then you will also want to include the sales representative category, but where should this one go? Well, the good news is that it doesn't really matter. You can either put it as rows or columns. The information displayed will be exactly the same, but the arrangement of the pivot table will be a little different, and we could test this. So if we take the sales representative category and we drag it to columns, we could see that for each sales representative, we get the sum of the total income from their sales. But we can move that, the sales representative, to rows instead of columns, and we get the same information, just the arrangement is now a little different. Pivot tables are a great way to obtain specific information very quickly. And you can also do multiple comparisons at once. To add on to this pivot table, let's say that we now want to calculate how much each sales representative made in sales every month. We would still keep the final price category in the values, and then you could put the sales representative in columns, for example, and then the month category in rows. And now let's see what the pivot table looks like. Well, we have the different sales representatives as columns, and then we have the different months from January to June as rows. And here we get the total income from sales for each sales representative for each month. As a little challenge, try using the pivot table to calculate how many chairs of each model were sold each month. Pause the video to complete the pivot table and come back when you are done. Great job! Let's see how we would do this. If you ever have a pivot table already made and you wanna start one from scratch, you could do so by deselecting the categories that you previously had to start with a blank pivot table. So in this case, we wanted to analyze or see how many chairs of each model were sold in each month. So in this case, the values that we want to plot are not the final price, but the number of chairs sold. So that will go in values. Then you could add the model as columns and the month as rows, or you could have these flipped and you would get the same information. It's just the table would look a little different. So now our pivot table is showing for each model of chair, how many, what was the number of chairs sold. So now we are not looking at price or income, but the number of chairs sold in each month of that year. If you would like, you could pause the video to explore more combinations with pivot tables. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon in another video.